So good morning. We're back in Mountain Ridge Church on YouTube, and we're in a series called Success. Sam kicked off the series, but before we jump into this series, I just have to point out, 2 weeks ago when I was here talking, it was like we were walking on the surface of the sun. It was hot, it was humid, it was crazy. Then last week when Sam was here talking, it was crazy. It was like Noah's Ark weather, and we missed the ark. Like we were in the middle of a rainstorm looking for the ark. This week, everything's changed and it's cooled down, and I don't know if the weather's changed for good for the fall. I just know something's changed. Kind of that South Central PA feel. You get to feel all the different kind of weather storms that come through here and all the different weather patterns. Anyway, we're back. We're talking about success. I'm super happy to talk about success. And again, Sam opened up the series on success. Now, before we jump into it, I do want to point out something that I think is really important. I think sometimes the modern day person listening to a pastor preach about success kind of struggles with. So I just want to throw this out there. One of the things that's really important to understand when we talk about success is context. So do we want kids to win soccer tournaments? Yes. Do we want kids to find success in school, to apply themselves, do well in homework and study and get good grades? Yes. Do we want you to go into business and be great at what you do and make profit? Yes. All those things are success in this world. What we are trying to say is we want you to succeed, but the greatest way to succeed is succeeding with God and understanding your relationship with God. That's foundational. That is the most important part. So you can win soccer tournaments, but if you don't have that relationship with God, you may not be winning. You can be the greatest person in business and achieving wealth. That's awesome. But what's greater than that is your relationship with Christ. You can be a person that really excels in school and get degrees and be very, very smart and intellectual. And that's great. We want that for you. But if you're not having that relationship with God and developing that relationship with God, I think there's some rust on some of those trophies. So do you understand what we're trying to say? There is context. We want people to succeed in the areas of this world. Yes, we live here. However, the greatest success is found in your relationship with Christ. And that's really what our question to you is during this series. What is success to you? Let's talk about success. Let's define it. And that's where we're going today. So like I said, Sam kicked it off. He did such a great job kicking it off. I would really encourage you, if you've not seen it, to go back on YouTube and see it, because it prepares you for this talk. And I don't know if you remember what he said, but one of the things he said was, many times people from outside the church, they look at us inside the church, and many times, they walk with hurts from us or, previous church experiences, and they walk with that hurt, and they label us inside the church, and they say, you're hypocrites, you're judgmental. And Sam really pointed out well that, hey, the reality is the church is filled with people, and we're people too, and we're just as messy and we're just as hurt as everybody else trying to figure it out. And Sam challenged us to remember that going to church doesn't fix your problems. He's really kind of outing religion. Going to church doesn't necessarily fix your problems, doesn't necessarily heal your heart, doesn't necessarily fix our mess. In fact, there's work to be done. Do you remember what he said? He said, listen, many times people accept Jesus, they can experience Jesus, they can go to church, and then they think, well, I've arrived. Well, actually, Sam pointed out, your journey just started. And he did such a great job with that last week. Really encourage you to go back and watch that. Sam set me up really well for this week, because the last question he asked in his talk last week was, what is spiritual success to you? What is success to you? How do you define it? How do you wrestle with that? And that's really the direction that I want to go into this week, defining what success is. Now, to begin, one of the things I think would be a really big help is for us to understand how our world defines success. I think it's really important to understand success in the world we live in, the culture, because when we understand that, we'll be better at understanding success through the lens of God's kingdom, right? So let's begin. And the first thing I would say, when you look at the world, our world tends to look at success and measure it by the things we own. And basically what that means is, the car you drive, where you live, the clothes you wear, your title, your beauty, your talents, all that stuff. The world kind of looks at someone and measures them based on what we own. And to make matters worse, what we do is we tend to compare ourselves to others to see how we're doing. So I own my stuff, and then I look at you to see the stuff you own, and your car's nicer and newer and better, so I'm losing. And then someone's looking at me, and my car might be bigger, newer, and then they feel like they're losing. It's kind of our culture we live in, right? And this way of living can become so normal for us, unfortunately. We believe our self-worth is wrapped up in the stuff we own. So we view our self-worth wrapped up in like money and beauty and titles at work and the perks we get at work, degrees we've earned from school, talent we have in sports and music. And unfortunately, like I said, our self-worth can be wrapped up in that stuff. And we tend to live in a world where people will look at someone who's wealthy and say they have it made. And so that is what we pursue to find our self-worth. In our world, that's success. Another translation or another description of success in this world would be we measure success by what other people think of us. We measure success by what other people might think of us. This is why I think social media has exploded. We've literally created this fake world, and we literally look at that world and say, do people like us? It is so, what social media has done is great because we get to stay in contact with each other in another way, but in many ways it has done probably equal, if not more, damage to us. One of the ways we measure success is by how we believe people view us, right? And as shallow and as empty as that is, it's real. It has an enormous pull in our hearts, right? We really do care way too much about what other people think of us, right? So what career do I have? Where are my kids going to school? What if I don't start for my team? And even worse, what if my child doesn't start on the team? What will people think? What will they say? What kind of clothes would I wear? What church do I go to? What car do I drive? Like, we care way too much about what other people say or think, right? We can live this way for so long, something terrible can begin to happen. And let me explain it like this. You're going through life and someone validates you, someone celebrates you, and your self-esteem skyrockets. I feel great because someone said something nice. And then someone criticizes us, and then our self-value, our self-worth just is shattered because someone criticized us. And we live in this emotional roller coaster. I feel great because people like me. I feel terrible because they don't. I feel great and I don't. And what's happening? Well, we're caring way too much about what other people think of us, and we caring way too little on what God thinks of us. But many times in our world, we measure success by what other thinks of us. And so we tend to look at people who appear to have their world all together, and we say things like, they have it made. And so that's what we pursue to find our self-worth. The third way I think our world tends to measure success is we measure success by what we do, how we perform. I don't know if you fall into this at all. We want achievement to prove ourselves to us and prove ourselves to others. We want to achieve, we want to perform, and we want other people to notice our titles, what we've done, all the things of who we are. We must achieve, we must get the awards, and then other people finally will believe we're valuable, or we will believe in ourselves that we are valuable, right? We believe something awful, and I just want you to follow me this. I want you to follow me on this. We can begin to believe that I'm only valuable when I achieve something, and actually I'm worthless if I fail. It is a devastating way of living, because what happens normally is you'll never be able to achieve enough. And so whenever you have a goal and you meet that goal, it's never going to be enough. It's a really hollow and shallow way to measure success, right? So how do we treat people? How do we view our children? What does that look like? Well, if we view achievement as a measurement of success, we'll view our spouse, we'll view our children through the grid of what have you done? What have you achieved? And in our world, we tend to look at people who've achieved a lot and we say they have it made. So that's what we pursue to find self-worth. What's really interesting is to look at the world we live in and how the world measures success. And then when God shows up in the form of Jesus and he begins to describe success in the kingdom of God, it is a completely different list of ways of measuring success. I want to read for you what God, through Jesus, shared in this first sermon in Matthew 5. This is what he said. They are blessed who realize their spiritual poverty, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Jesus said, they are blessed who grieve, for God will comfort them. They are blessed who are humble, for the whole earth will be theirs. They are blessed who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. They are blessed who show mercy to others, for God will show mercy to them. They are blessed whose thoughts are pure, for they will see God. They are blessed who work for peace, for they will be called God's children. They are blessed who are persecuted for doing good, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Do you see the conflict? The way our world measures success, the things we pursue for self-worth, is in complete conflict with what Jesus in the kingdom of God views as far as what success is and what we should measure as success. I just really wanted to bring that out early in this talk because I think there is a complete different way of viewing success. And we're encouraging you to understand that success in this world is good. I want you to get good grades. I want you to do well at school. And I want you to perform well at work and make a profit. But understand what's greater than that is how God defines success. Now, I'm not going to do this here on the video, but on Sunday, this weekend, it's called Better Together, and the kids stay in. And one of the things we're going to show for them is a book by Max Lucado. It's called You're Special. If you have children or grandchildren, I really encourage you to get a hold of this book by Max Lucado called You're Special, because it helps teach kids what spiritual success is. And basically what it teaches is this little wooden boy who the master created. He goes through life, and in his world, if you did something well, you get a star. If you can't perform as well, you get a dot. And he ends up with all these dots, feels bad about himself, and then he learns that what he needs to do is go to his maker, Eli, and the dots fall off, and he knows that he is special. And if you ever want to give kids practical handles on what it looks like to succeed in life, I'd really encourage you to reach out, get that book. And again, we're going to do that on Sunday. We're not going to do that here right now. I'm just going to jump into more of my talk now. Spiritual success, defined by Jesus, is really to be fully surrendered. Now, that can be a little fuzzy. So when I throw that out there and say, well, spiritual success is fully surrender, well, what in the world does that mean? And so it can be a little fuzzy, and it can be kind of weird in the interpretation. So what I want to do is I want to talk about what it looks like to be fully surrendered. I want to give you a couple gauges in your life to get handles on it practically, and then we're going to bring out a Bible story and talk a little bit about it. So if I tell you spiritual success is being fully surrendered to Jesus, what does that look like? And here's gauge one. Gauge one is I spend time with Jesus. I'm in this relationship with Jesus, and it leaves me content. It leaves me kind of a non-defensive person, and I'm free from the approval and disapproval of others. We would call this courage. Gauge one, and you should ask yourself as you're watching this, how do I do with this? I'm with Jesus. I'm in this relationship with Jesus, and it helps me. I'm content as I go in the day. I'm just really a non-defensive person. I don't have an edge about me, and I'm free from the approval and disapproval of others. In other words, you should try to be a good person, but their opinions don't radically wreck me or radically, put me on a high, right? In my times with Jesus, the voices that push in on me, voices like, you're stupid, you're worthless, you're rejected, they're drowned out by the message that God gives me that I'm loved and I'm special. And because of my relationship with Jesus, I can enter into my world with courage, and I don't have to enter this world with fear. So that's kind of a gauge one. How do you do in that gauge? Are you with Jesus, and are these things happening to you where you can go through life with courage? Gauge number two, because I'm with Jesus, I'm able to bring out the best in others around me. And of course, that starts at home. Because I'm with Jesus, I'm able to bring out the best in you, right? We call this love. In my relationships, I no longer leverage relationships to get what I want. Now I see that I can join Jesus in what he's doing, and I'm going to join him to bring out the best in you. Do you see how it's different? I'm not going to leverage you to get what I want. You could be my spouse. I'm not going to leverage you to get what I want. You could be my boss. I'm not going to try to leverage you for what I want. You could be the person at church, my leader. I'm not going to leverage you to get what I want. No, I'm working with Jesus, and I now see that my role is to join him and help bring out the best in you. And when people disappoint me, and they will, shocker, right? Spoiler alert, they will. I'm reminded of how many times I disappoint Jesus and how faithful he is to me. So how are you doing with that gauge? Gauge number 2, which is I'm able to love. Gauge number 3, I want to be with Jesus, I want to be who Jesus created me to be, and I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to wait for his timing. We call this patience. I'm willing to be faithful. I'm willing to serve unnoticed as God develops my character. I'm not going to jump the gun. I'm not going to assume that God told me something and maybe it's for 40 years from now, but I need to make it happen now. And as frustrating as it can feel that nothing is happening, I trust my God. I trust my God, and I'm going to trust in his timing. How are you doing with that gauge? You want to be who Jesus created you to be, absolutely, but are you willing to wait for his timing? Gauge number 4, I trust Jesus so much. I'm able to allow life to unfold. And I give up control, I give up my ego. I'm just going to allow life to unfold. Now, we would call this peace, this way of living where I'm just going to allow life to unfold and just really give my trust over to Jesus. So let's be clear. I control what I can control. I control my character. I control my work ethic. I control my plans for the future. I mean, you should brush your teeth, right? If you want your teeth to hang around, brush them. You control that. Absolutely control that. So we control the things we can control. However, when things go outside of our control, it's going to be okay. I trust in God so much that I'm going to allow life to unfold. And when it unfolds, even when it's different than what I want, I'm going to trust him and be at peace. And this includes being able to give up, the outward appearance, everything's so perfect. So how are you doing with that gauge? Are you able to walk through life and just allow life to unfold? And are you able to trust God so much that you give up control to him? So it's such a great gauge. I'd be curious to know how you're doing with gauge number 4. Gauge number 5, I'm comfortable dealing with the reality of who I am. I'm comfortable dealing with the reality of who I am. That would be my emotions. That would be my actions. Like, why do I always get angry? Why do I always get negative? Why do I always get sarcastic and mean? Why do I see the worst in everything? What's in me that would create that? Those are my emotions. And so when I'm angry and it comes out of me, and when I'm sarcastic, it comes out of me, I'm responsible for my actions. Gauge number 5 says, I'm comfortable dealing with the reality of who I really am. I don't put it under the rug. I don't do bad things and say, I promise never to do it again. No, I deal with it. We call this integrity. When things pop up, I deal with it. Now, we understand as Christians, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel fear. It's okay to feel anxiousness. It's okay to feel stress and anger and all these things. These are real emotions, and it's also okay to do something about it. So understand it's okay to be not okay, and let's understand it's okay to do something about it. And as we're jumping into dealing with these things, I'm okay being transparent. I'm not going to be defensive. In fact, I'm non-defensive. And I'll give it the time it needs to find healing. So how do you do with that gauge? Do you find that things pop up in your life and you just ignore them? Things pop up in your marriage, you just ignore them because what's going to happen someday, it's going to come back and it's going to be bigger and worse than you could ever imagine. So are you dealing with these things? These gauges, I think, are a great way to get practical handles on spiritual success. If we were to wrap all this up in one word, I'm going to go back to where we started. Surrender. Spiritual success is absolute surrender. And understand this about spiritual success. You can't hide it. as much as you want to. You can't hide it. So the life that's fully surrendered, everybody around you will know, and the people with your family will experience. And as much as you try to hide it, if you're not surrendered, everybody around you already knows, and your family currently right now is experiencing that. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to jump into a Bible story to see how this plays out. I want you to join me. It's in Luke 10, 38 to 41. Let's just jump right into it. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits there while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "Dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken from her." So how many of you out there have heard this story before? How many of you out there have heard this story, and this story bugs you, right? How many out there, because the story says Mary and Martha, and of course there's two women involved, how many of you ladies out there listen to this story and you hate this story, right? How many of you secretly think, I'm Team Martha, right? The girl got stuff done. If everyone was like Mary, nothing would get done. How nice it would be for Mary just to sit there and do nothing. We need more Marthas. And by the way, the story never even tells us, did the disciples get fed? What happened when Jesus said, "Hey, Martha, Mary's sitting here doing nothing. You need to join her and do nothing." Did the disciples get fed? We don't know. It's not in the story. Let's face it, life would be better if we had more Marthas to get things done. Martha's the girl who would get the kids on the bus and they get to school. Mary's the girl that'd be inside, flaky, praying, and the bus came, missed the bus, and she'd show up late with the kids to school, right? So how many of you are Team Martha, and how many are you Team Mary? Well, I want to pull out of the story a little bit and reassure you. The story's a little bigger than guys versus girls. It's not just about ladies. The story's a little bigger than about who got fed that day. And it really has nothing to do with who is right, who is wrong, who's good or bad. It's a story about surrender. So let's start with this. Really important to start with. Martha loved Jesus, and Jesus loved Martha. They were in relationship. In fact, it was a close relationship. When the sisters, Mary and Martha, when their brother died, his name was Lazarus, when he died, they sent a message to Jesus saying, "Hey, Lazarus is sick. Please come heal him." By the time Jesus showed up, he had passed away, and he brings him back to life. They were friends. Jesus hung out in their home. So let's understand, Martha loved Jesus and Jesus loved Martha. But we also have to understand, as much as Mary loved Jesus, she wasn't surrendered. She wasn't surrendered. How do we know? How do we know that Martha wasn't surrendered? Well, she's full in control, right? She knew a lot of guys were coming over, and she knew a lot of work had to get done. And so she began to think, the tasks that I need to do are so overwhelming, I don't have time to be with Jesus. I got to get things done. Martha's way of living is this way of living where she always seems to be like touchy, anxious, irritable, that person where there's always so much going on and I got to get things done. As my girls like to say at home, that's a soda you don't want to shake. Martha would be the girl that you don't want to shake because she's touchy, irritable, and anxious, right? What is really interesting about this story, I don't know if you picked up on it, what's really interesting about this story, Martha is so full on control, in control, she's comfortable telling Jesus what he needs to do. She's comfortable telling Jesus to tell her sister what she needs to do, right? It's a remarkable story. Notice everyone, including God, had to do what Martha wanted, right? So how about you? How do you live out your faith? Are you walking in this sense of control? Do you see all the things that need to be done? And there's so many things to be done. There's so many colleges to look at. There's so many grades to look at. There's so many soccer things. There's so much that needs to get done. I don't have time to be with Jesus. And as much as you don't want to admit it, are you kind of walking in a state where you're always touchy, you're always irritable, and you're always anxious? In fact, people around you are kind of scared to kind of bring it up because they're afraid of your response. It's going to come back at them, right? And there's always an excuse. There's never a day that goes by that you don't have a great excuse why you are irritable, anxious, and touchy, right? Let's be honest. Do people around you who are relaxed, don't they bug you? Like your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, like no one just sees things like you do. You're full on control. Things need to get done. And these other people, they bug you because they're relaxed. It just bugs you, right? By the way, what are your prayers like? Are you basically in prayer and telling God what he needs to do to get on your page? Mary's different. Mary's very different. She is fully surrendered. She has fully surrendered her life to Jesus. How do we know? Mary's at peace. Yeah, a lot of guys were coming over. Yeah, a lot of stuff needed to get done. However, the task that she saw that needed to be done, she thought it was more important to be with Jesus. Do you see the difference? I mean, it's a special moment, I think, when Jesus is going to hang out in your family room. And Mary saw that. She also knows guys were coming over, but she also knew this was a very special moment. Mary chose to sit quietly in front of Jesus. She never tried to control Jesus. She wasn't showing signs that she's touchy and irritable and anxious. She didn't demand that God do things for her. She didn't demand that God would get a hold of her sister and make things happen. She was at peace. So how about you? How do you live out your faith? Are you walking through life in peace? Do you see all the things that need to be done and you realize there's so many things to get done? I have to be with Jesus. I want him on my team. I need him to be the foundation of the day. Are you centered? Are you relaxed? What are your prayers like? Are you able just to enjoy the presence of God? See, what's similar about Mary and Martha is they loved Jesus and Jesus loved them. What's different is one was telling God what he needed to do, get on her page. The other was fully surrendered. So is this a story about being lazy, about having a party, inviting 25 people over, and just being lazy? Is this a story of having a party, 25 people are coming over, and then that afternoon, right before people come over, we as Christians, we're supposed to have Bible studies, forget going to BJ's and loading up on stuff? No. Let's pull out of the story. It's bigger than that. The story is simply about surrender, about how we live our lives, how we live out our faith. Are you struggling to get God on your page, or are you fully surrendered? I want to read for you what Jesus, what he said to his disciples in John 12:24. Jesus spends time with his disciples before he's crucified. And he says this to them: I tell you the truth, unless a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone. But its death will produce many new kernels, a plentiful harvest of new lives. Those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will keep it for eternity. Anyone who wants to serve me must follow me, because my servants must be where I am. And the Father will honor anyone who serves me. I want to read this same text that was in the New Living Translation. I want to read the same text, but I want to read it in the Message version. It says this: listen carefully, Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat is buried in the ground, dead to the world, it is never any more than a grain of wheat. But if it's buried, it sprouts and reproduces itself many times over. In the same way, anyone who holds on to life just as it is, destroys that life. But if you let go, reckless in your love, you'll have it forever, real and eternal. If any of you wants to serve me, then follow me. Then you'll be where I am, ready to serve at a moment's notice. The Father will honor and reward anyone who serves me. Jesus, before his crucifixion, is explaining to his disciples that he must surrender his life and die, because only then can God resurrect Jesus. And when God resurrects Jesus, he breaks the curse of sin and death. And if Jesus would have never surrendered his life, you and I would have never been able to experience the resurrection power of God. And then Jesus begins to explain to his disciples and say, hey guys, If you want to be my disciple, if you want to follow after me, if you want to understand what spiritual success is, you're going to have to die to your life in this world to come follow me. And if you die in this world to your life, I'm going to bring you to life, and I can do so many things through you. But if you don't die in this world, you're only going to exist. You're going to lose your life. You'll pay your bills. You'll mow the lawn, and your life will be empty as you search for purpose and never find it. Search for meaning and never find it. Here's the point that I want you to wrestle with today. Only what dies can God resurrect. Only what dies can God resurrect. Now, obviously, Jesus was not talking about us physically dying and something weird like suicide. Nowadays, it's important to bring that out. He's talking about surrendering our lives of selfishness in this world. So what area in your life do you struggle to surrender? Just to be clear, God can't redeem the area in your life until you surrender it. If you keep it and hold on to it and struggle with it, he's not going to be able to bring it back to life. So let's talk about a couple areas of your life. Are you struggling in the area of money? It's just overwhelming. It's always a problem. It's always hard to get on God's page. Are you struggling in the area of relationships? You don't have friends. You're looking for friends. Everything goes, but what's going on there? Are you struggling with sexual things and you know what God says, but you're struggling? Is it wounds, addiction, jealousy, anger, greed, control, stress, anxiety, fear, and we could go on? God resurrects what dies. So what is spiritual success? Well, Jesus taught it's to be fully surrendered. And earlier, I gave you 5 gauges. I want to recap real quickly. Gauge 1, I spend time with Jesus, and it leaves me content, non-defensive, and free from the approval and disapproval of others. I can walk into this world with courage. Gauge 2, because I'm with Jesus, I'm able to bring out the best in other people. I no longer will leverage you to get what I want. I'm going to join Jesus to bring out the best in you. We call this love. Gauge 3, I want to be who Jesus created me to be. And so while things don't work out the way I want, I'm content. I'm going to wait for God's timing. And in that time period, God's going to develop my character. Gauge 4, I trust Jesus so much that I'm going to allow life to unfold. And I'm going to give up control and ego. Things may not look the way I want them to look, but I'm going to be okay with that because I'm going to trust my God. Gauge 5, I'm comfortable dealing with the reality of who I am. So when negative emotions keep popping up, I'm going to deal with them. When negative actions take place, I'm going to deal with them. And I understand it's okay not to be okay, and I also understand it's okay to do something about it. So what is spiritual success to you? How do you wrestle with that? To end, I want to end with the words of Jesus in Matthew 16. And I just have a question for you then. This is what Jesus said. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you'll lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. My question to you is this. What is Jesus asking of you? I really want you to wrestle with that. And if you have a handle on that, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email. What is it that Jesus is asking you to surrender? Is that a challenge? Have you been wrestling with Jesus and not surrendering it? Because I want you to remember this, so important. God can only resurrect what you surrender. Spiritual success is absolute surrender to Jesus. We hope this gives you great handles on what it looks like. Yes, we want you to be a success in this world, but understand the greatest success is your relationship with Jesus. You can have all the successes of the world, but if you don't have that relationship with Jesus, none of those successes matter. Please remember, God will resurrect what you surrender. God bless you. We'll see you next week.